I wanted to talk about essentially what is a generalized problem. I think it's only come to my mind because of my discussions with people in the Venus Project or proponents of it. And it comes from the fact from what I see as a complete lack of understanding of the word science and really what evolves into what Hayek would call scientism. And to explain for people who are proponents of the Venus Project and people who love science in general but aren't quite educated on how the sciences really work, scientism was a word coined by Hayek in his observation that there were many economists in his day, and still are today, where they will try to emulate the natural science method, of falsification, experimentation, laboratory kind of constraints, statistical analysis, dependence upon for the formation of their theories. And this natural science approach to economics, although looks like it should be the way you should do it because there are seemingly empirical bases for some economic principles, in practice, it doesn't work out. For example, you can't perfectly isolate consumers from producers, so we can't quite get how can I say it, an empirical basis for the patterns of consumption and the patterns of production. The only way we can get this is from the concept of marginal utility, which can only be kind of presupposed on first principles. I mean, even Jevons, who was a Walrasian, who used mathematics to exhibit or illustrate the marginal utility concept, still depended upon an implicit basis of first principles, which is why, for example, Carl Menger, who independently discovered marginal utility without mathematics, he was a journalist of his day, um, was able to explain in just full sentences the same concept, the logic of it, the psychological basis for marginal utility. And so, even without mathematics, you can still come up with marginal utility. Mathematics just simply clarifies and isolates some attributes of marginal utility in terms of the essence of what it really is for somebody who's more math-minded like Jevons was. And so, in practice, what you have to understand is that social sciences like economics or psychology or sociology um, are all based on essentially some level of first principles. Now, some of these first principles may have a basis in, say, a material substrate basis, such as in the case of economics with marginal utility, where a person doesn't want one more product or one more unit of a product. It could be because the psychological basis of it fulfilling the want is measurably equivalent to what has already been fulfilled previously by the previous unit of a product. Meaning that, in essence, why would the brain logically choose, or even illogically, from an emotional sensory perception kind of response, want to have more? There's no point. It's already satisfied. Therefore, boom, just stops. Very deterministic, very easy to see. So there could be a physiological basis for that, and even a neurological basis, but it doesn't add any more to the discovery already found. So you can see here the natural science method doesn't really get us more in disciplines like this. Conversely, scientism could also mean, at least from my perspective, a more modern perspective here, that it is the misapplication of not only the natural science method upon the social sciences, it could be the misapplication of the social science method of first principles on the natural sciences. A great example of this is all the hullabaloo, or whatever, all the hype for M theory and string theory. Most of that is based on just purely mathematical constructs, which have already been previously proven true for some parts of the standard model in physics, such as what we see with symmetry and so on. And what they were trying to do is trying to extend all of those constructs which we use in other parts of physics to justify, and not only were proven right later in experimentation, for other phenomena, to then explain and justify a much more beautiful, mathematically so, ensemble of unifying these things. And it may, in fact, may be true that perhaps some form of M theory is true, but it is inappropriate for the domain of physics to act like it's a social science like economics and work from first principles or foundational principles to then extend to theory and therefore just assume vacuously true, therefore, ta-da, M theory is right, which is what we see today. I mean, it just doesn't work. The guy who, of course, runs the blog, Peter Ware, is his name Peter Weir? I think it might be. He does the blog Not Even Wrong, and he talks about this. He just sees that there's so much presupposition on part of M theorists that therefore it has to be true because all the mathematics that's behind it has been proven true for other phenomena and other parts of physics, and it doesn't work like that. He points it out just simply. And, as well as experimentally, he points it out. Like many of the like the many of the other linear accelerators have been showing none of the numbers that M theory has been saying. But anyways, the general point is what I see, at least with the layman or the layperson out there who sits outside and looks at sciences in general, like computer science and so on, they need to understand it's a science because it is an exact discipline. It follows an exact organizational structure with its knowledge. This is why computer science is a science. It's a logical science, just as all disciplines of mathematics are. And you have all these other social sciences that deal with the dynamics of individuals, of agent driven systems, essentially, which happen to be composed of us, human beings. And physics deals with the natural sciences, which are essentially, it's kind of a misnomer to call them natural. We should call them the physical sciences of chemistry, of physics, of biology, which deals with physical systems and how their substrates interact with one another in different domains and even in the subsets and so on. And they follow very nice, neat organizational patterns of knowledge. That's all really science is. It's just that each science has its own domain and its own methodologies. And I think if people would actually understand this and be actually properly educated in the actual nature of science, perhaps things like what we see with the Venus Project, where people say, well, this isn't scientific because it doesn't follow the natural science method, which I see a lot of people who are supporters of the Venus Project try to tell me. Um, and really, they don't understand what a science is and how a science is formed. And so it gets, it's kind of like you're talking one language and they're talking another language. They presuppose one lexicon. You, of course, unfortunately, are speaking in another. So that being said, it's not just them. It's a lot of people. Creationists, I've seen this with. Just people who love sci-fi in general. It's a sad thing. It really shows, at least in North America, I've seen this to be the worst. I mean, in some parts of Europe, or people I've talked to from Europe, have slightly less illiteracy with sciences in general, but they are still heavily indoctrinated into the kind of logical positivist perspective on science, and that everything must be this way and so on. It's a sad state of affairs, and I don't know if there will ever be a turnaround on this. Maybe 100 years from now, I don't know. All I know is that hopefully this video will open some people's minds to actually understanding what science is and is not.